I'm here to talk about overlanding, from how-tos, advice, gear, vehicle builds, and everything in between. Everything we're going to cover today applies to your pre-trip, during your trip, and post-trip inspections. So let's go ahead and start with under the engine bay. I always like to begin with my fluids. So we're going to go over our brake fluids, our oil, transmission fluid if you have that, if you can inspect it. Some transmissions now are sealed, especially ones with a lot of gears in them. We're going to check our power steering, and we're going to check our coolant. With your brake fluid, you can get a pH strip from like a Napa or any car parts place. That way you can always be checking to make sure that your brake fluid is healthy, it's not deteriorating. Also for your coolant, you can get what they call a Glycol Refractometer. That's going to let you know what state your coolant is in, if it's breaking down or if it's still healthy. It's something that's important because if it does break down, you can start to get electrolysis throughout your coolant, which will start to corrode your engine, so make sure you keep up on the coolant. And one more thing to check under the engine bay is your air filter, of course. And while you're at it, check the in-cabin air filter as well. All right, so let's move on to the battery. For us, our electrical systems are very important, and they also are something that can cause us some problems because we have so many aftermarket things. So starting with your core battery is the most important part. So make sure all of your terminals are clean. And a good thing to do that I like to do before we go on a trip is to fully charge your battery out of the vehicle, let it sit for a day, and then put my multimeter on it to make sure that it's holding a charge. And then put your battery back in and make sure that you're not getting any parasitic draws. Let's go over tires real quick. I like to make sure that I check my tire pressure every morning around the same time. That way the temperature is roughly the same and you won't see too much variance in your pressure itself. So that's a good way to just make sure your tires are holding air throughout your days of travel. Also, we want to check for the wear pattern on our treads, make sure everything is even. Then we're going to make sure and check our sidewalls and our treads for any punctures or slashes. Also, you want to make sure that your lug nuts are properly torqued. Make sure you check your manufacturer specs on those. Also, that can depend on what kind of wheels you're running, if you have aftermarket wheels. Obviously, if you over torque your lug nuts, you're going to stretch that lug out. And then finally, make sure you check your spare tire. Make sure that tire is holding air. Make sure it's on the rim properly, and make sure that that rim is fully functional and not damaged. So now let's take a look at our suspension. We're going to check our springs, make sure there's no stress fractures or marks in there, make sure the integrity is good of the spring. The cylinder of our shock itself, make sure there's no leaks coming out of that. We'll check our hoses, our reservoir. We're also going to check all of our fasteners on our linkage here, and a good thing to do is get yourself a paint pen. After everything's torqued down properly, you're going to go through and mark all of these. And that way, when you're going down the road or on your trip, you can check every day and be like, yep, they're still tight, they're in place, you're good to go. Now let's take a look underneath the vehicle and see what needs to be addressed. One of the first things and easiest things I like to do is grease the drive line. So you're going to find your grease zerks at all of your U-joints from your transfer case all the way back to your differential. And then you're going to have one up in here, your front drive line, from your transfer case up to your front differential. So grease all those U-joints in there, just feel around, you'll find those grease zerks. Don't go too much though, otherwise you're just gonna spit grease out, it'll get nasty in there. Another thing I like to do before I get out on the trail is check my transfer case and my diff fluids. So I'll just open that top cap up, stick my finger in there, make sure the level's good, of course, and then just have a quick look at it. Also, it's always good to check those after you do water crossings. Now on all of our vehicles we have CV joints, so I'm going to check my CV joints, make sure those boots are solid, they're not cracking at all, the inner and outer joints. If you're not running the IFS, you're going to have something like a Burfield joint, check those, make sure that they're all clean, make sure your sweeps aren't leaking out. Also while I'm here I'm going to take a wheel off, I'm going to check my brake pads and my rotors. It's a good time to check your wheel bearings too, so give that wheel a shake when it's on there. You'll be able to feel if it's too loose or not. It's a great time to check all your bushings. All your suspension and linkage bushings right now is really accessible. So take a look at those, make sure that they're not cracked or blown out, and that'll just save you on the trip, make things a lot smoother for you. It's also a great time to check your tie rod ends and all of your links. Now that we've checked all of our critical vehicle functions, we want to check the hardware on all of our aftermarket products. So we're going to go over our roof rack, rooftop tint, our max tracks, alley boxes, our lights, anything that you have bolted onto your vehicle. We'll even do our winch, our bumper, all of our body armor, everything that needs to be fastened on. As I mentioned before with the suspension, use your paint marker. It's a great idea to mark all of those things, and then as you're traveling, you'll be able to see what you do and don't need to tighten up. I'll go ahead and leave a spreadsheet for you guys below with the checklist on it. I'll add a few more things in there, and I'll leave some space for you to add your own stuff as well. So please leave your questions and comments. I'd love to hear what you guys do for your vehicles for maintenance, and we'll have a conversation about it. We'll see you next time.